we started. And, the church is distinct in character. The church is distinct in time. We explained, I don't have to explain them again. And the church is distinct from Israel. All right, let's look at that one. I mean, we already looked at here. The term Israel always has racial, ethnic overtones, right? Ethnic overtones. And we saw a verse that is Galatians chapter 6, verse 15 to 16. For neither is circumcision anything, nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. And those who will walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God. So I was saying, and I'm saying here that it is better translated, especially upon the Israel of God. When I say Israel of God, I am talking about Jewish Christians, Jewish people who believed in Christ, right? They are the Israel of God. I am not saying church is the Israel of God. I'm not saying. I'm saying Israel of God is the Jewish Christians, right? So I explained them its detail. Now I also wanted to spend some time here in Romans chapter 11. Romans chapter 11. The whole interchange of Romans 11 makes no sense unless Israel and the church are separate groups. So if you have never read Romans, please go ahead when you go home, read Romans chapter 9 to 11. I forgot the author's name because I think I remember I used that name years ago. But he wrote a book. He has given a lot of free books. He wrote a book, the most neglected chapters in the Bible. The most neglected chapters. They are Romans chapter 9 to 11. People don't like to read, right? Because it talks about election, talks about Israel. So let's delve into this one here. The whole interchange of Romans 11 makes no sense unless Israel and the church are separate groups. Paul argues that Israel did not attain what they saw, expecting a small elect remnant. This opened the door for non-Israelites to be grafted in, right? Not into Israel, but into salvation. Yeah, I know covenant theologians usually would say, we are grafted into Israel. No, we are not grafted into Israel. Actually, in the context, I might say even to the promises that God made by Abraham. And of course, in salvation. This is made clear by the fact that vast majority of Israel remained outside this arrangement and becomes envious so as to be grafted back into their own tree. Right? So what you read is this. Paul says that all Israel is not true Israel. All is not true. I mean, yes, all the Jewish people are selected as a nation, but all of them are genuinely saved. There are people who are saved. There is a remnant, he says. Remnants, that means the salvation is not right now, not everyone believes. They rejected the Messiah. And he's saying, I am willing to die for them if they believe. But it doesn't happen. I'm ready to sacrifice myself. Or I mean, he's saying, I'm ready to go to hell for the sake of my brothers, if it can happen. But they will not believe. All of them are not saved. All of them are not. So he says, but there is only remnant. He explains. And then he says in chapter 10 and 11, especially 11, he says, because of Jewish people rejected, now there is Gentiles The door for the gospel is open to the Gentiles, he says. Then he concludes chapter 11 by saying, but don't think that God left Israel. Don't think. Finally, all will be saved, right? All will be saved. Idea is the majority is going to be saved at the end time. That is the idea. All will be saved. So the passage culminates in verse 26, where Paul explains, in this way, all Israel will be saved. All right. So this verse, this chapters bring some kind of problems for us, debates. It could mean the grafting in of Gentiles, right? What is let's look at Romans chapter 11 for a minute. Otherwise, okay, Romans chapter 11. Romans chapter 11. Engrafted branches. All right, let's read from 13 onwards. 13 onwards.
I'm talking to you, Gentiles. Inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles, I take pride in my ministry, in the hope that I may somehow arouse my own people to envy and save some of them. For if their rejection brought reconciliation to the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? If the part of the dove offered as first fruits is holy, then the whole batch is holy. If the root is holy, so are the branches. If some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root. Do not consider yourself to be superior to those other branches. If you do, consider this. You do not support the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in.
Go ahead.
Granted. But they were broken off because of unbelief, and you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but tremble, for if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either.
Go ahead.
Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God. Sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. After all, if you were cut out of an olive tree that is wild by nature and contrary to nature, were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more readily will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive
tree? All right. And then if you look at the rest of the verse, and finally, verse 26. Okay, verse 26 or 25, 26. Let's read that also.
I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers and sisters, so that you may not be conceited. Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. And in this way, all Israel will be saved, as it is written.
Yeah. Then I have this quotation from The Old Testament. Yeah, it's all that is the passage. It's very, very, the argument of Paul is very convincing that God still has a plan for Israel. Still has a plan for Israel, for no doubt. If anyone says that the importance of Israel is over, well, that is not Paul says in the New Testament. We are talking about in the New Testament, right? Not in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, Paul talks about the importance of Israel in chapter 9, 10, and 11, right? So let's look at the debates. It could mean that grafting in of Gentiles and salvation of wayward Jews together constitute the salvation of all Israel, some could say, or the completed people of God. So some people say salvation of Israel, all Israel, means it is grafting of Gentiles and salvation of wayward Jews. This understanding was popular in the post-Reformation era, but has lost its popularity today, even among covenantalists. The term Israel appears 10 times in previously in Romans chapter 9 to 11. All references either ethnic Israel or the elect subset of the ethnic Israel, right? Either ethnic Israel as general or the subset elect that is within the Israel who are saved. For it to mean something different in verse 26 is very unlikely, where if you say all Israel means Gentiles and Jewish, that is what many teachers. I'm saying no, it's unlikely. Further, this understanding seems to fly directly in the face of Paul's point in this chapter to quell the triumphant anti-Semitic gloating of Gentile believers, because they were even Paul's time, they were people who were Gentile believers who were anti-Semitic. They were boasting, oh, God rejected Jews. We are now. And Paul was answering, and clearly now the passage we read now, he says to Gentiles, don't boast because you are shown mercy. Don't boast, Gentiles. That's what he says. So, hutos, here in this verse, tas, in this way, right? We read in this way, all is right. Hutos could be temporal, indicating that after the Gentiles were grafted in, then all Israel will be saved. This is an attractive option for the dispensationalists, but demands an extreme rare usage of hutos. So what is the explanation? Likely is that a more likely understanding of this verse 26 is the summary statement for the whole of verses 11 to 24. As it summarizes, the complex means that God would use, complex means God would use to fulfill his irrevocable promises to national Israel. It summarizes that God definitely will fulfill the promises that he has made to Abraham and to David. Since Paul's point in this passage seems to be the suppression of the Gentiles' boast that God had permanently rejected Jews. That is what Gentiles were saying. His point is that no, and turned to the Gentiles as a new people of God. So Paul is saying, no, God did not reject Israel. It makes greater sense that his conclusion would include the return of God's attention to national Israel. Let me say one thing. That means God's attention has not turned to Israel even now. This is not, some people are very, very quick to answer. Wow, they started to come back. No, nothing. There's nothing happening much, right? God's attention to Israel will turn one more time when church is raptured from this world, when the church is removed. Until this time, this long period of history will continue. Okay, I hear. Yeah, will continue the rejection of Israel, right? and Israel will reject continuously, and they will be rebellious continuously, and God has rejected them, not for permanently. There's a temporal rejection, and right now the only thing that God builds now is the church, not anything else. I mean, God intervenes anywhere, but God's particular attention right now is this. God's established institution now is the church. It is the supreme thing for God now. It is a unique place where there is no Jew, no Gentiles, nothing like that, where anyone can gather together, anyone can be saved and be accepted and be the member of the coming kingdom that God is going to establish in the future. So that is what we understand. But so the conclusion is this: term Israel always has racial and ethnic connotations. Jews have no advantage in the church of God today by virtue of their ethnic identity. There is no advantage, but they do not lose their ethnicity either. In the NT, term Israel may refer either to the whole corpus of Jacob's descendants or subset of that group that is saved. There are two ways the word Israel is used in the NT, but there is no NT usage of Israel that cancels out ethnic meaning and applies it to a separate group that is the church. In the New Testament, the word Israel never applied to the church. While Israel and the church both described in terms of Abraham's seed, right? That is right. Yes, church and Israel are Abraham's seed, are both virtually connected by God through the metaphor of marriage. Both relate to God by blood redemption supplied by Jesus Christ, right? The reason why you became the Abraham's children is through Jesus Christ. Because God said to Abraham, through your seed, Abraham, the whole world will be blessed. So I will make you a great nation. That is Israel. Through your seed, the whole world will be blessed. That is through Jesus Christ. Whole world is going to be blessed. So that's how we are connected to Abraham, through Jesus Christ. Not because we became a new Israel. No, we are connected to Abraham. Abraham is father of faith. Our father. He's also our father, no doubt. But that he is our father because of Jesus Christ. Right? Because of Jesus Christ. So that's what we have to learn here. All right. So I think our time is right there for our break. So I did not explain much here. Basically, what I wanted to look at, Romans chapter 11. The question is, did God reject Israel? Chapter 9 to 11 tells, no, God did not reject Israel permanently. There is a temporal rejection. That temporal rejection is to show kindness to you Gentiles. Therefore, you should not boast that, oh, God rejected Jews and only accepting Gentiles. No, there is going to be a day coming that God knows how it is easy for him to graft them again into the branches. Even though because of their unbelief, it is broken off, but God can bring them back to the root, to the stem, grafted again. That is what Paul's argument. God can save them. And his conclusion is, thus, all Israel will be saved. All right, so that is what we learn here about the distinction between church and Israel. I am saying I see a complete distinction between church and Israel.